Today, we're talking about the idea of commitment and whether you're in commitment, whether you're true to your commitments, or whether you are out of alignment with your commitments, whether you've broken your commitments. Those can make all the difference in building the business, the career, the life that you've dreamed of. Stay tuned. Giving architects and landscape architects the tools and strategies to be seen, heard, and valued in the marketplace, and telling the stories of leaders building thriving design firms and attracting their ideal clients. This is From Architecture to Profitecture. I'm your host, Jay Krakowski. Let's get started. Fellow and future Profitex, hello. How are you? Welcome to the show this week. And it's a biggie. Word commitment. Yes, it's in all caps there for a reason. It's a huge notion, and it actually touches on every part of, certainly of your business and your career, but also digging into your life. And I think it's summed up best by a small green creature, namely Master Yoda. There is no try, do or do not do. It's really that simple, or do not. It's really that simple. It's very black and white. You either have made a commitment and are sticking to it and are taking the actions and reinforcing the behaviors to achieve that commitment, or you're not. You can't be, and I believe, I'm trying to think about who uses the word the most. It's probably Gary Vaynerchuk says you can't be half pregnant. It is, you either are or you're not. You can't be sort of committed to something. You can't want to commit to something after ABC XYZ happens, or I'll commit to it next year. Well, you're just not in commitment. And now, how does this play into running a design firm, into our businesses? Are you committed to, or did you commit to hitting a certain revenue mark this year? And despite all of the setbacks and the craziness that is 2020, were you able to make pivots? Were you taking those consistent actions, whether that's in waking up at a certain time, whether that's in reaching out to potential leads a certain number per week, or continuing to foster relationships with contractors and other consultants, even when work took a bit of a pause in, say, March and April of this year, at least in the States it did. Were you true to those commitments, despite whatever came in your way or came up in your way? I have a series of questions that I think are really important to stop and reflect on, even if it's not on a daily basis, but certainly during goal setting, or certainly on a monthly basis. And again, especially if you're running a design firm and trying to build it to the success that you want. So, one thing to think about is, what are your true commitments? Not just your goals that you had for the business, but out of those goals and out of the things that you want from your life, what have you committed to? Again, are you committed to a certain number of hours of sleep a night? It's important to be a sharp and focused business owner. Exercise, nutrition, and then again, reaching out to leads, professional networking. Maybe it's professional development. Maybe there are skills that you need to learn to make your business better, or skills that you need to have your staff or contractors or employees, what have you, develop so that your firm can run more smoothly, more efficiently, or just create better work. What are those things? And go ahead and list those out somewhere. You should have them. You should be writing these down. That's, obviously pen to paper. It helps to solidify it in the brain, not just thinking it, but potentially saying it out loud and certainly writing them down. What are your commitments? And then from there, you can start to identify the actions and the behaviors that are either reinforcing and pushing you towards those commitments, or are potentially holding you back. Are there behaviors? Are you getting into a Netflix binge or going down the YouTube wormhole at 11:30, 12:30, 1 in the morning when you shouldn't be, as opposed to getting good sleep, or as opposed to working on that design that is due in 24 or 48 hours, but you keep putting it off? And is that serving you? So, another question to ask yourself that's not a fun one is, when's a time when you broke a commitment? And while it's certainly not fun to reflect on, it's important from an objective standpoint. Just look at it as if you were a camera in the corner of the room, or on the side of the discussion. What were the things that you said you would do? What were the actions you said you would take? The deliverables you said that you would provide, and maybe you didn't. And of course, you would probably have a couple reasons, aka excuses, why that couldn't happen. But and I know James Wedmore, one of my mentors, often harps on this. When you make a commitment and you know that you, for whatever reason, excuse or not, whether it's legit, if you blow a tire driving to a client meeting, yeah, you're not going to be there on time. But the way to maintain that commitment is to text or call ahead and say, hey, this happened, or I'm running 10 minutes late. I text my clients. If I'm more than 2 minutes late, I'm texting them. I'm letting them know that I'm not going to be there right at 11 a.m. It's a habit. It's a habit that you need to work on. And it took me a while. It really took me a while. Now, the client meetings, that part was easier because there was a face-to-face interaction, behind a mask or not, depending on what year you're listening to this. But when it comes to actual deliverables, when you say you're going to get something to them, middle of next week or by Friday, does that really mean Friday at 4:59 p.m.? And how is committing to that, or how is that serving you? Committing to pushing to the very last second of a deadline, or it might be that you're going over that deadline. I have been guilty of that. That's something that I have needed to work on pretty consistently. I'm certainly in a much better place than I was when I first started out, when I was just kind of taking whatever projects would come in, and if I overloaded myself, well, some things would fall through the cracks, and I would use that as an excuse internally, but then have to backtrack and whatever explanation I would give the client at the time. Well, hey, it's actually going to be next Monday or Tuesday. I wasn't able to get it done this week. Well, in a way, you've broken the commitment, even if it wasn't critical to the construction schedule or just to their decision making. Even if they weren't even thinking about it, even if they got distracted in whatever they were doing that given week, and it was fine, they weren't bothered at all. It's still an idea of breaking a commitment, and how are you addressing that? So every once in a while, I want you to think about that. Or when you catch yourself breaking a commitment, scribble down what you were thinking, what you were feeling, maybe the actions that you took, or the actions that you took to repair or maintain the client relationship, or to get the thing done. Maybe that's staying a little extra, or employing help when you absolutely need it to keep those commitments. Another question, and we talked about this in just last week's episode, but identifying what you want. The way to, if you're having trouble identifying, the things that you are truly committed to in your business, and or a time where maybe you think you may have broken a commitment, go back and look at your goals, your overall goals for the business or for your life or your career. What do you want? And if you don't have clarity on that yet, that's a great place to start. Because after all, how can you commit to something if you don't? How can you commit to a path of direction if you don't know where you're going? You don't just get in a car and say, I think I want to go here, and then just start driving without mapping it out, or using your GPS if you need to. You can't run a business without a GPS. You can't run a business without a business GPS, should I say. That you need to have a sense of where you're going, and that will help you to build a list of commitments that you need to make to get there. So look about what do you want, and some things. Now these forthcoming questions will help you, identify maybe the skills or behaviors that you need to work on to maintain those commitments, to build that design firm that you've always wanted. First is, are you able to put off a short-term gratification? Our instant gratification culture, I think, has actually made it harder to run a creative business in some ways, because especially when we're in front of screens and you have the distractions of social media and whatever the heck else is out on the internet that can pull your attention. It's all too easy to just click away. Or if you set a certain number of design hours and yet you're checking email every 15 minutes, or you've got the little noise dinging every time an email comes in or a text comes through. That's in a way that's succumbing to short-term gratification, and it's veering you off the path of where you need to go, whether that's to meet a deadline, whether that's to send out a number of prospecting emails, or you're calling your network, or you're just following up on leads, but you're getting distracted by all these other little short-term hits of dopamine in a way. Are you able to put off those short-term games in view of the long goal? Now, what's another example of this? If you have a long-term goal, or even an annual goal of hitting a certain revenue, yet you're taking anything that comes in the door. Now, I understand if you just started out, you may need to take everything that comes in the door, and that's fine. But if you've built yourself up over a couple of years and you're able to keep the doors open, the lights on, stay in the black, as they say, are you still taking each and every job that comes on? And are you taking all these little jobs that are honestly, when you look at revenue to time invested, that's just totally out of whack? Are you still doing that? Is your business still doing that? And how hard is that made, achieving that revenue goal, or that number? Let's say it's a number of projects per year, or it's a certain project type that you want to move into, yet you're still taking the quote unquote bread and butter jobs. You're still taking all these small jobs for your quote unquote friends that are consultants that are feeding you work. Well, but if it's still either holding you back or it's taking you in a different direction from where you want to go, is it really serving you? Yes, it might be the short-term gratification of dollars in the bank account, but if after doing those projects you have no energy left, creative or physical or otherwise, to pursue the things that you really want to pursue, to kind of focus on the commitments that you made. Again, either it's a number of projects, or it's a revenue goal, or it's a type of project or scale of project that you want to move into, and that's setting you back. Take a look at that. Another question in looking at being able to keep your commitments is a pretty easy one, I think. What do we do when we fall off the horse? Or some have asked, why do we fall off the horse? To get back on. What do we do when we fall off the horse? We get back on. And what makes the strongest business owners, the most resilient business owners, are the ones that learn how to get back on the fastest, or the most easiest way. They know how to get their foot in the stirrup and swing their leg over quickly, rather than sitting back and scratching their head and calling a colleague and Googling it. And they have learned to just get right back on. And I know it's a metaphor here, but as you go through years in business, and before that years of mentorship and experience in our careers before we decide to go out on our own, it's a learning curve and it's a learning process. But the businesses that are most resilient, whether it's in a down economy or a pandemic like this, or just the craziness of an election year apparently, it's those businesses that learn to get back on the horse the quickest, that learn to course correct the quickest from a setback, from an employee leaving, from a client either pausing or canceling a project altogether, or heaven forbid something going really awry in the relationship and the contract is outright terminated and the relationship is terminated. How quickly are you able to course correct, or are you wallowing in self-doubt and judgment for months on end, and it's going to totally derail your business? The idea of resiliency and speed is something that's not always congruent with the design process. We need to iterate. We need to work through the best solutions for all these different factors coming in. It's not just a simple spatial exercise. There's all the building systems, there's all the landscape systems, there's the client and the end user. We're factoring so many things in our design work, and when it comes to our business, it's really no different. So figuring out the ways to course correct when something goes wrong is really the mark of a business owner that is committed to whatever that end goal is, whatever that success is for you. And speaking of the design process, are you ready, willing, and able to use that creativity beyond just the design work? Again, it's not just the speed in which you can quote unquote get back on the horse, but it's figuring out creative solutions when the ability to meet face to face all but dried up this year, or many projects went on hold, or certain project types went away for whatever reason, how are you able to pivot and use the creative minds that we have developed in years of schooling, years of experience to make a shift in your business and keep those commitments? Again, whether that's a revenue commitment, whether that's a commitment to keeping on your staff, contract or permanent, how are you able to pivot, especially here in 2020, to keep those staff working, employed? Hopefully you have. And then, finally, again, I don't mean to end on a downer, but we need to self-assess a lot of times. What behaviors are making your commitments harder to keep? Are you? I'll go back to it again. Are you getting enough sleep? Really, are you getting enough sleep? It's almost a laughable question in the design and construction, at least in the design field, maybe not construction. But are you getting enough good sleep so that your brain is ready to go the following day, or that you're not inching your way towards like adrenal failure or something or adrenal fatigue rather, which is a real condition of what they call just burnout. But physically, it takes its toll. That stress and anxiety, or working too much, or trying to do absolutely everything yourself, it takes a toll. Are you eating properly? Are you spending too much time in front of a computer? Are you taking care of your eyes when you are in front of a computer? I know I'm in front of a screen right now, but when I'm 3D modeling, or whether I'm on a longer email session, I'm always wearing blue blockers. I guess the science is mostly confirmed that it does affect your sleep, especially in the evening time. I know on phones, at least on the iPhone, there's a setting it'll reduce the blues and make it look more yellow after a certain hour of the day, because it actually affects your melatonin production. And I'm not trying to get too geeky here because I'm not a scientist, but little things like that can actually help you keep your commitments, even if maybe you're staying up too late watching Netflix or staying on the computer, not working, and not taking care of yourself. Are there behaviors in terms of moving, in terms of getting out of this chair? I've had to remind myself of that on certain days or certain weeks when it's just a production week. It just is, and I'm going to be in this chair for much longer than I should have. But you have to get up and take breaks, because otherwise, yes, are you committed to getting the work done? Sure, but at what cost? At what cost? Can you work an extra hour that evening, or over the course of a week, several hours, but still take your breaks so that you're not sedentary the entire week, and which affects kind of your long-term commitment to being a resilient and resourceful business owner? What other behaviors might you have that are getting in the way of your commitment? So I've been thinking a lot about the word commitment, certainly this week as it relates to business, and I just wanted to share some of these questions that are hopefully thought-provoking for you. Hopefully will generate, once you can take the time to kind of sit back and think of them. It's not going to be a 2-minute exercise. It's as big as goal setting. The commitments that you need to make or dismiss. Maybe there's things you have been committed to that aren't going to serve you in looking at your business or career goals. And it's important to identify those. But it really is, it's black and white. When you figure out that list, you are either committed to them or you're not. There's no middle ground. You can't be sort of committed to going for the goals and the dreams that you have, again, for your business or your career. So I want to thank you for joining me. If you have been listening and you like what you hear and see here, jump over to Apple Podcasts and leave me a review. I'd really appreciate that. If you have any other ideas or notions or interviews that you'd like to see on the show, shoot me a DM at Jake Krakowski, Facebook, LinkedIn, or Instagram. And of course, until next week, go out and make it a great week, because our success is inevitable. Take care. Thank you so much for tuning in. Don't forget to hit subscribe so you stay up to date with future episodes. Connect with me on Facebook, Instagram, or LinkedIn at Jake Krakowski. And for show notes and much more, visit profitecturebydesign.com/podcast.